I'm Philippa, CEO of Paradigm Norton, and this is Life Matters More, where we explore ESG, sustainability, and the future of business. Today, I am joined by Ross Fairley, the senior partner of Burges Salmon and one of the UK's leading lawyers in the clean energy and net zero space. Ross has spent more than 25 years working at the forefront of energy transition, advising on everything from offshore wind to hydrogen, carbon capture, and landmark citywide decarbonisation projects like Bristol City Leap. He not only leads one of the UK's top law firms, but also plays a pivotal role in shaping the renewables agenda more broadly. He chairs RenewableUK's Strategy Forum and previously served as Deputy Chair of the UK Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Recognised in the Lawyers Top 100 and Legal 500 Hall of Fame, Ross has been a consistent voice for innovation, collaboration and action on the road to net zero. Ross, it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I'm really excited to dive into our journey.
Thanks very much, Philippa. That was a very generous introduction. So,
well, all true. So I am very excited to have you on here. But let's start from the beginning. How did you get into? It's not an obvious area of law for a young lawyer coming into work. How did you get into clean energy? You've been doing it for over 2 decades now.
Yeah, no, it was. It dates back a little bit. I started life as an environmental lawyer, specialising in that particular area after I'd done my training contract, and there was a kind of natural synergy between moving from environmental law to renewables, which at the time that I took that decision was just in its infancy. So with some of the first wind farms being built and some of what were then viewed as renewable energy projects, which were the big waste to energy incinerators and so forth. And those projects and electricity has always fascinated me as well because of the infrastructure around them and things like that. So it was really interesting. It fitted nicely with my interests in on the environmental side. And the great thing about the sector is, even at that time and the time now, you can see that it's incredibly fast-moving, fast-paced, innovative area to practice in. So it's really exciting, and you're meeting really incredible people who are innovators, entrepreneurs, always looking to improve things, always looking with a mindset towards climate change, environmental issues. And it was really exciting to be among them and to be helping them achieve what we thought were, those days and still do, really clever, innovative projects, which are going to set us on the right track in the future.
I always think it's interesting. Obviously I was a lawyer for 20 years and being at that novel end of the law. I mean, where do you start when you're looking at, you were involved in renewables before it was mainstream. How do you manage the sort of obligation on a lawyer to be right, with that being quite a novel, as you said, area of practice?
Well, I think that's really part of the interesting thing about it, and it's why I love doing it, and it's why I would be particularly wanting to do this area, I think. And it's not, I get the fact that lawyers are interesting people, aren't we? Because there is a bunch of lawyers that would hate to be in that position where you're having to give your best calls on things as opposed to be absolutely 100% right on any legal aspect. But I think, you're right. You need to be the type of person who can look at where the law has been. You could, in many cases, laws aren't written, you see, for the renewables projects, or you're adapting laws that have been developed for other technologies, and so what you've got to do is give your best view as to what's going on and marry the things together. And I think that's the key. That's why it's exciting, but it's also sometimes quite pressurized as well, in the sense that you have to give advice. You have to stick your neck out and say, actually, I think, on balance, this is the way I would go. And if you're dealing with entrepreneurial clients who are in a race to deploy and to make the most of technologies, they They don't want advice where you're sitting on the fence. Well, it could be this, it could be that. They want to know.
Yes.
Come on, what is your what's your view on this?
Yeah, so interesting. You must have had to learn quite a lot quite quickly. So if I look at, if we dig into that net zero area that you've been sort of focusing on, and all the different technologies you have, hydrogen, carbon capture, offshore wind, like a whole menu of technologies. Like, how did you learn about them? And actually, through your learning, I'm always really interested in, what are the underappreciated solutions out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take the first bit. How do you learn? I mean, I think there are laws out there around electricity and energy and so forth, so you get familiar with those. But then, you're also marrying that with the practicalities of a new technology. So you're learning actually from projects and from clients. And I've always been a great advocate of making sure that you do understand at a level the technology and you understand what the drivers are. Because it just makes life more interesting, and you're bought into the project and you want to see it happen and you want to see the technology flourish. It's just interesting to do that, and it makes for a much more satisfying job, and better advice if you're understanding how things work broadly. I don't profess to be an expert on all the technical aspects, but if you understand it to a certain extent, you can work out through, and in over periods of time as new technologies come along, you can see the synergies between certain technologies. So some technologies are fuel technologies, and you know what the issues are around fuel supply and supplying things to people. So you can draw analogies from other technologies that have had challenges in that area and apply them to there. You can find solutions that one technology grappled with and say, well, that's very similar to this technology over here, and that's where it becomes really interesting. But the great thing, I think, as well, for youngsters entering the legal profession, or frankly, even if it was consultancy and other things in this area, is there is an ability to really, if you spend some time getting to know the technologies, there's an ability to help shape the law. Because as I said at the beginning, not all the laws are written for all the technologies. But in fact, what you find with all of the new technologies is the law's always catching up, so it's never there. What you've got to try and do is look at previous law or a general law that's applied to energy and say, well, it needs to be tweaked or it needs to be adapted, or you need to interpret it in this way for this technology. So there is an ability, and that's one of the attractive things I think about this sector, to really become an expert in a relatively short space of time. It may be some hard yards to start with, but in a short space of time, you can understand technologies, and you can move forward with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lagging indicator.
The question was, yes. What was the?
So I was
all the technologies, I suppose.
Yeah. So I mean, what's going to work for us? Where should we be focusing more attention? What's kind of underappreciated? There's so much tech here that you understand far more than I do, and I just think it's a really interesting direction to travel.
I suppose my really flippant answer to that is, there's a real danger when people talk about energy and electricity and technologies that everyone says, well, which one's going to win? And, the government picks winners and it says, we're going to need huge amounts of offshore wind, or we're going to need huge amounts of this and that. And then there's a danger whenever you pick winners that you go, right, well, that's the technology everyone's betting on. And, the incentives, the laws, everything else is geared towards that, as opposed to trying to keep it as wide as possible and encourage new technologies. Because one of the lessons we've all had to learn in what has been this industrial revolution in electricity over the last 20 years is that the first solutions you put in place, well, something will come along that might be a bit better than that later on, and again and again. So what you don't do is try and close off options. So I suppose maybe it's a legal answer, I don't know, but I would be saying we need, with the targets we've got to meet on climate change, if we're serious about it, we need as much electricity generation as we can possibly get. We're going to be electrifying, and that means transport, it means heat, it means all the increased electricity anyway from the technology we're increasingly using, and And so you need every technology that's going. And if we, as the UK, just being a bit parochial at the moment for the UK, if we want to capitalise on the benefits of this in terms of jobs, then we need to be at the forefront of new technologies and innovations so that we can capture that technology, the learnings, the high value consultancy jobs around those new technologies. So is there an undervalued one? Yeah, there. I think there's a danger in saying they're all undervalued, actually. We need as much as we can get for the moment. And it's inevitable that some technologies ultimately will drop away that may be seen as not as successful and not as useful. But I don't think we're at that stage yet. And at the moment, we should be grasping every technology we can get to see whether it works.
Yeah. Which I suppose leads us into you chairing the Renewable UK's strategy forum, and kind of digging down a little bit deeper into, we should do a lot of everything, please.
Yeah.
I am interested in your views around how industry and government can shape that policy. What sorts of things are you talking about at the Renewable UK's forum right now?
So that I'm a past chair, so it's just finished on that. Just to be clear, but I think the key things for government are to find ways in which, as I say, we keep our options open and we electrify and decarbonise as much as possible, and that means incentivising as many technologies as we possibly can. Now that's easy for me to say, but in a constrained financial world, that makes life a little bit more difficult. I think the beauty about some of the industry groups is that there genuinely is, again, you've got collections of individuals who want to see things happen, who and frankly, the dialogue I've always had as part of those groups with government has always been good. I think the challenges you've got with when you're liaising with government is there is a challenge because the civil servants you're liaising with, they tend to move on after a period of time, and then you're having to get people back up to speed in a technology space. I think there's also, and this is maybe one of the lessons for the UK to learn as well. I've tended to see that government departments are quite siloed and traditionally have been. I think it's starting to change now, but one department could set the aims of decarbonising and doing this, doing that, only to find that another department is doing something completely the opposite. Not deliberately, but just the policy set by another department is completely counteracting the aims of that. And it's quite frustrating when you see that and you point it out and you see that there's sometimes a great deal of difficulty in ironing that one out. And I've never understood why that can't be that. There can't be more dialogue between those departments.
That's incredibly frustrating, isn't it?
It is. It is frustrating. I think the other thing, you're taking it back to industry itself and the industry groups as well. One of the roles I played on that forum was to make sure the organisation itself, Renewable UK, which has been a fantastic advocate of all wind technologies, renewables technologies, but it's got to make sure that when it's advocating, it's taking into account all the technologies that are out there, all the technologies that may come along as well, with the broader aim of decarbonisation, and it's making sure that that we're taking a broad church approach to say that we need to change this or we need to lobby for this, because ultimately this is going to be great for renewables, as well as, for example, with Renewable UK on offshore wind, wave and tidal.
So tell us a little bit more about Renewable UK. I don't know very much about it at all, actually, and our listeners may not know very much about it. Why was it set up? What are its aims, and what sort of things have you been involved in when you were chairing the strategy forum?
Well, Renewable UK grew out of what was the old British Wind Energy Association, which was the initial association set up to encourage what was then onshore wind, and then obviously quickly moved into offshore wind in the early 2000s. And it's an industry group focused around wind. It's grown out from that into marine energy, wave tidal, now green hydrogen, and future systems as well. But it's, I'm a huge advocate for Renewable UK and what it's done, and it's got a big voice within government. And I'd encourage people who are interested in renewables to look at the website and get in touch with them. But it's fair to say there are a number of renewable energy groups and industry groups working together. And, I think that's one of the things that the industry's got to learn as well, because, for example, I was also deputy chair of the Hydrogen Energy Association. You've got things like the Renewable Energy Association. And there is a good dialogue between them. But as technologies have developed, sometimes you end up with industry-specific technologies, which is good in one sense in that they're concentrating on what is needed for a particular technology. But it's absolutely essential that those groups work together and have a dialogue together. Things are in place to make sure that happens, but I think the industry's got to make sure that happens, because what we're seeing at the moment is maybe politically and on macro level, maybe some pressure around net zero. There's a lot of vested interest, historical interest in electricity, which people are fighting for as long as they can fight for, and I think that the renewables industry's got to get its message across with one voice, and it should be quite a powerful voice as well.
It's so human, isn't it? You find it in companies as well as governments, as well as industries, that people are siloed, and that collaborative voice is so important. I suppose not everyone listening will be in the renewable sector, and part of those voices. Is there anything they can do to support Renewable UK in what they're doing? Can they lend their voices? Can they add themselves to any of that? Is there a call to action that we can ask?
I think so. I mean, I think people, one of the things that's always been said about the renewables industry, when you are putting new electricity infrastructure up, whatever it may be, whatever it is, there are always planning concerns and planning issues. There's concerns amongst the local community about what the impacts are, particularly if it's unknown. And I think, often those concerns are really sort of amplified from those people who have those concerns. There's a lot of people who actually support renewables and who actually think it's a really, really good thing. In fact, overwhelmingly, public support is for renewable energy. The issue is that you don't hear the voice of the people who are quite happy for something to go ahead. You tend to disproportionately hear the voice where people are not happy with something. And so my plea to everyone who on renewables is if you are interested in the area, if you want to encourage it, let your voice be heard. Let the politicians know as well that you're enthused about it, and you want to see it happen. I mean, there's a huge opportunity here, I believe, for my kids as well, for decent jobs, and that does depend on government support and government grasping the nettle. But there is an opportunity here to do that, and to set jobs and opportunities for future generations here, and we don't want to miss that. And I think that's important for everyone to realise.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right. It's the outliers that people hear, don't they? And I think you're right. I think there are far more people who want to see this happen than not. And raising our voices to say that is a fantastic call to action. So we talked about how there are some frustrations and some challenges for renewables in the UK, but I'm really interested in how well we're doing, and I feel like we should be a market leader somewhere across the UK in that area.
Yeah, well, I think we tend to underestimate what the UK has done. I mean, the UK has been terrific over the years. We've built a massive offshore wind industry that's the envy of the world at the moment. We've got deployed offshore wind and buckets coming online as well. We've got onshore, we've got solar, we've got battery storage, we've got innovative technologies like deep geothermal, like wave and tidal. We've been leading the sector in that for years. So there's huge positives that we're able to do, and we're really, really entrepreneurial in the UK. We encourage innovators, and that's one of the great things about being in this sector is working with all these people and just understanding what they can do and the power that's there. And there's a terrific opportunity, as I've said, to grasp this and to build jobs for the future. If you look at the consultancy sector, the sectors maybe you or I in as well, we've got huge amounts. We lead the world in the sort of high value consultancy of legal, technical, financial consultancy around green and clean energy. It's a huge contributor. So we have done fantastically well. And I think sometimes what we focus on is the immediate things and how politics are going and whether one technology is facing difficulties or is progressing or not. But if you just go back and say, wow, look at what we've achieved over the last 20 years from where it was. It is astonishing how things have changed in the last 20 years. And that is rapid, okay? When we will look back in years to come, well, people will probably look back after I'm gone anyway and go, how did that happen in such a short space of time? It's amazing. So we should be rightly proud of that. But as with everything, there's a but, isn't there? You can't be complacent, and you've got to look forward, and you've got to make sure that having got this position, we go forward. And I think if I was critical of the UK and UK government, we do an enormous amount to encourage entrepreneurs, and we're very, very good at getting technology to a certain stage. What we're not so good at is, having got it to a certain stage, capturing all the opportunities and just having the bravery to keep going and to provide the funding to get technologies out into deployment and capturing the industry that flows from that.
So I wanted to talk to you about, it's funny enough, I did want to talk to you about collaboration. Is that down to collaboration? So you said 20 years, things have moved forward enormously. And I'm assuming what you mean is, the tech has just, compounded over that time, our knowledge, the amount of people who are interested in it, and the amount of money. I was looking at some statistics only this week about how much money is in the sort of sustainability investment sector and how much we're expecting that to increase. So we've had that sort of big improvement in the technologies. We are forward leading in that. And then we reach a stage where what happens? Do people just get scared? Do the people move out of that kind of funding for VC and they're not big enough for floating? Is that the sort of main issue?
Yeah, I think there's a number of issues at play in my experience from looking at some of these younger technologies, because what we've tried to do at Burges Salmon is spot the young technologies, and we invest quite a lot of time in the young technologies coming forward. With the knowledge that most of those at some stage will reach fruition, and then we understand those technologies, we can take them forward into mass deployment. And the hurdle you always face is you get to a certain stage where maybe the demonstrator's been produced or the demonstrator's ready to go, if it's offshore in the water or on land, wherever it's going to be. But it's raising that last bit of money to actually put the first one out there. And, the available finance for those first demonstrators of new technologies, unproven technologies, is a real challenge. And there does seem to be historically, there's just a lack of availability of what I would call government funding or government boost to get them over that hurdle. Now, that's a very easy thing to say, but sometimes it's quite a lot of money to get them over that hurdle. And, in a constrained world, appreciate that's difficult, but that's where you end up with governments picking winners and losers, which may not be the right ones. And, there are lots of entrepreneurs out there, but there's a lot of technologies that die in what they call that valley of death, where they've got the demonstrator, they're ready to deploy, they just can't get the funding to get them out there. And what you then tend to find is they either go to another jurisdiction who is willing to provide that funding, and so you lose the technology in the industry, which is really upsetting, or they just wither on the vine and another technology overtakes them and does something, and you look back and go, well, actually, that was a bit silly. We had we had got a technology to a certain level and we were ready to go. And why couldn't we have the bravery? It's not just bravery; it's a very flippant thing to say there, because it is money at the end of the day and it's funding. I get that, but sometimes I look at it and just go, well, in the grand scheme of all the funding that the UK faces, how much is this really to get to move some of these forward?
It's so funny. This is literally the second conversation I have had this morning about that valley of death, and the need for there to be funding in that middle ground. Okay, so that's the funding side of things. But where you do have sort of perhaps multi-party projects, and this is moving into the realms of far more in the way of collaboration, and it's interesting from what we've discussed today. You being at the centre of a lot of people coming to you with new technologies, new thoughts, new projects, you must see across quite a broad spectrum of the sector. But where there are perhaps multi-project or multi-party projects, and particularly your position sat on the RenewableUK strategy forum, what causes those particular projects to fail in that collaborative space? Is it still the same thing? Is it still coming down to funding?
Yeah, it's funding, but it's also risk appetite on the various actors. So, I mean, you could apply these principles to, frankly, any big infrastructure project. Infrastructure projects. First of all, it's the technology. Is the technology ready? What government funding is available if it is new technology to promote it? But then you go back to the traditional things, whether it's even a proven technology. Who is where in the whole ecosystem and supply chain of those projects? What interests do they have? Are they distracted by something else at the particular time, which means that they're not going to concentrate on this particular technology or project? Are they asking for things that actually they're not going to get in the overall risk package because they ideally want something, but that's not going to work because it places an undue onus on someone else? And I think that's the role of advisors to the project. Technical, financial, legal, whatever they may be, is to explain that, and is to work through that and to find a balance between everyone and try and pull that together. I think consultancies in the widest sense, and I include legal in that, there is a great role to play in that. I mean, and it's a really valuable role that if you get it right, clients really appreciate as well, because the consultancies tend to have a view across multi-technologies. Inevitably, if you're a developer let's take an example, you're a developer in solar, you're focused on, largely speaking, solar and getting that deployed. And you know everything there is to know about the solar industry. But sometimes you're too focused on solar. What you haven't got the chance to do or the time to do is look up and go, what's happening over there in onshore wind or battery storage, and how can we take lessons from that? Whereas consultants are advising on those different types of projects all the time. They can bring those solutions in and go, hang on, there's a way through this. Look at what this sector did over here, or this technology did over here. There is a route through. This is the model you could use.
Yeah. And so, but that must have happened to you. You must have sat in meetings with people and said, well, actually, I had a meeting last week with somebody in a different tech. And so are you able then to facilitate introductions between people who must be so far down that rabbit hole of their own technology that it's hard for them to meet other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the other gratifying things I think about working in the renewable sector is, you are able to put people in touch. In one sense, it's a fantastic industry. It's a global industry. It's a massive industry in the UK. In another sense, sometimes I think it's also still a small industry. The people, you come up against the same people, the same organisations, and you understand who knows what. What we've got to do, I have to say, is expand that. That's one of the things that. But before I hang up my boots, I'd love to see happen is a much more expansion of people who know about the sector, because you still come across the same people, and we've got to do that. But yeah, we've regularly put people in touch with each other, and also we can advise people on what we know has been done in other sectors, or if we've put a solution. A great example a few years ago was because of the solar deployment rules and the tariff rules that were applying at the particular time. Lots of solar projects were being split up into smaller solar projects. So you'd have a X megawatt project, which was then split down the middle to take advantage of some of the rules, which meant that in some cases those two projects now would have to share a grid connection. So that established the first grid sharing arrangements. And then you have established industry like onshore wind going, a few years later going, okay, we need to start sharing these grid connections or the capacity. And you could say, well, that's been done. That's been done over there by the solar sector. And here's a model that we've used. This is what we did. So you can bring those solutions across.
I want to move on to talking about Bristol's City Leap. Now, I must confess, I don't actually know anything about this, so I would love to hear what it is from you first, and then we can talk about your involvement in it after we understand a little bit more about what it is.
Well, it was basically, the City Leap was a hugely ambitious project by Bristol City Council. And, the one thing I would say is, shout out to Bristol. For years, it's one of the reasons I moved down here to practice renewable energy and environmental law. For years, Bristol has been at the forefront of decarbonisation, encouraging green industry. It's really done a good job on that. So, I've got to give a big shout out to Bristol as a whole, as a city, for its credentials. There's some fantastic companies and businesses that have grown up down here and expanded around the world from Bristol as a centre. But that aside, so Bristol City Council had its net zero target and was a very ambitious net zero target, and one that it was looking to meet. And it realised that in order to achieve the initiatives it needed to do to decarbonise, the best thing to do would be to partner with the private sector and find a partner that's going to help them decarbonise their cities, their buildings, and advise their residents, their communities on green energy. So it was a massively ambitious project involving the whole ambit of decarbonisation, from electric vehicles to heat networks to solar projects to onshore wind. And it was a huge exercise, tendering exercise, to find that partner over a number of years. And it was the first of its kind as a structure. I played a very small part in it. Lots of people at Burges Salmon played a lot larger part in it. Lots of people at Bristol City Council played an even larger part in it. And what I would say for authorities looking at that as a model, it may be that the size of your authority is such that it doesn't quite work for you, but I think there's bits that you can take from the City Leap model that you can take in bite-sized chunks to look at it and to use it as a model. But I would say that the lesson for me, looking on at what Bristol did and all of those individuals within the City Leap and Bristol did to get it across the line, you've got to have an authority that's committed to it. You've got to have individuals that can have a can-do attitude that can make it work. And it was great working with those people, because there was a mission to get it done, a can-do attitude, a way that people would find routes through the issues that arose all the time, and a real commitment to it. So take my hat off to the council and to everyone involved in that from their perspective.
Makes you very proud to be a Bristol resident, doesn't it? A Bristol citizen.
It does. And as I say, that's just one part. But Bristol, over the years, has done an enormous amount in renewables.
And so you say that's why you moved down to Bristol to work at Burges Salmon to continue your renewables practice. I mean, Burges Salmon is known. Not in large part, in small part, to you. And it is very well known within the legal sector for its values-driven approach. You, congratulations, are the new senior partner of Burges Salmon. I mean, how do you go about building on that and, protecting that ethical, purpose-led? I mean, it's not a small ask, particularly in a growing law firm.
No, it's a challenge, and law firms grow, and you've got to try and maintain that ethos, and as you say, build upon it. I mean, I'm very lucky, really, because I'm inheriting a the values that have been well established over decades, a mentality within Burges Salmon of enshrining those values and making sure that we're a sustainable law firm, which actually, with what's going on in the world at the moment, with what's going on in the legal profession, you'll know as well as I do, is, there's some interesting things going on. And I think it's very, very important to have law firms. We're not the only one, but law firms that have those values, have that sustainability angle to them in the legal profession. And I'm absolutely convinced that it encourages really talented people to come and join us as opposed to other firms. And I'm also absolutely convinced that it's better for our clients as well. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, so one of the things I've always pushed forward on the renewables side and from the legal side as well. If you want to change people's behaviour, which you need to do to encourage renewable energy, decarbonisation, we've got to change people's mindsets and views. And if you want to encourage the legal profession and sustainability and the values in the legal profession and maintain that, you've got to show people that it makes sense. And, I would argue you also got to make sure that it makes business sense as well, because if it can make business sense and make good sense, then people will look at it and go, okay, we'll do it. We will definitely do it. We can see the tangible benefits of doing that. And you've got to show that. And I'm convinced we can do that at Burges Salmon in terms of our values and sustainability angle, as I'd said. But you can do that with renewables as well. Interestingly, we recently signed, it got quite a high profile actually, which was very gratifying, but we signed a deal with Oxygen Conservation on get some carbon credits for the Leon estate in and around Dartmoor. And you got a lot of PR around that. But the ethos of both Oxygen Conservation and ourselves on that is that biodiversity and looking after nature and restoring nature is good business and should be seen as good business, and you can make a business out of it. And if we can show people that that's the case, there's going to be a lot more people doing this. So that was one of the reasons why we signed that deal. It was one of the reasons why we paid quite a high price for the credits coming from it. And it's that idea that you can show that it makes business sense.
Yeah. And so, what else are you doing from your perspective? What are you building on? What's coming next for Burges Salmon in that sort of purpose-led sustainability cultural ask?
Well, it wraps up into the wider responsible business, which isn't. It's not just decarbonisation. It's not just environmental issues or sustainability issues. It's looking after all of our people in the right way. It's looking after their well-being. It's looking at diversity and inclusion, all of those areas. So we've got initiatives in all of those areas and target setting in all of those areas, which we set regularly and review annually as well. And there will be more initiatives coming out. We, speaking just from the environmental perspective and the decarbonisation perspective, we've set science-based targets now to reduce our emissions. So we've gone through that process, which has been, eye-opening, and, the reality hits about how challenging it is to decarbonise. Let's be honest about this. But we're committed to doing it. And, we've got our targets set there, and everyone's working towards it. As I said, though, I think we start from a base where we have, our people are all committed to this. They buy into it, and they can see the benefits of it. And we, as a firm, are reaping the benefits of it as well. So, that's a huge starting point to go on that journey of, constant improvement.
Yeah, and when it comes back to the fact that actually we're both really proud to be citizens of Bristol, where, as you say, it was the first council to take that step towards decarbonisation, and then to be proud to be working for a firm that actually takes that sort of thing seriously. And I utterly agree with you. People want that, and good people, will want to go and work for firms who genuinely care about that.
Well, the one I suppose I ought to point out as well that we've got offices in London and Edinburgh, and if you look at what those offices are doing, and if you look at the people we have based there, they're all bought into that ethos as well. So, our Edinburgh office has grown unbelievably over the past 5 odd years now, and they're doing terrific things up there. The energy team up there, because Scotland is another hotbed for decarbonisation, are doing some unbelievable things, helping clients, but also looking and taking forward all of our initiatives on our values and responsible business, as is London. So it's really nice to see an ecosystem across the various offices and across different parts of the UK where everyone's bought into that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've gone sort of deeper and deeper on we've gone from broad to narrow. So let's come back out a little bit as we sort of bring our podcast to a close. Talk to me about optimism. What is, and I'm assuming that you are optimistic about things. Otherwise, I doubt you'd still be doing what you're doing. So give me some optimism about the UK's journey towards net zero.
I thought all lawyers were supposed to be pessimistic.
I don't believe it for a moment.
I am optimistic. I'm really optimistic. I think that in this journey, if you're looking at renewables and decarbonisation and net zero, we are already so far down the line as a country that there is no going back. There's no going back. The question for me is just how long will it take? It's not that we're going back anywhere. So I think, I'm hugely optimistic that we will get there. I can't tell you the time we'll get there and how quickly it will be. But, I'm enthused and optimistic. One, because I've just said to you, Burges Salmon is doing this because we think it makes business sense. I talk to many corporates, clients and various others that we advise in this area. And they are absolutely convinced that it makes business sense. They are under pressure sometimes for, macro reasons year on year, and they have to look very carefully at initiatives. But when you speak to them at the underlying, overall position, that I would say almost without exception, they all realise where things are heading and where it's going, and they're committed to that. So that makes me hugely optimistic. Another thing that makes me hugely optimistic is our people and the people that are yet to join us, because, I've just got children just at university, just finished university. I've got friends and colleagues and schools and various other things, and you just look at all of those, and you can see that the future generations are more committed than perhaps even ours are to this journey. So there's only one way that's going, and they won't tolerate anything that gets in the way of that, I think. So it's going to happen, and it's hugely optimistic. I think that the biggest concern for me is that we know where we're going. We know we can do it. It's just a question of time. But for me, it's just a question of whether the UK itself, and again, I'm sorry to other countries and jurisdictions because I'm being slightly parochial here, but it's just a question of whether we as the UK can capture as much of the benefits of that and taking that lead as we should. And that's the thing that probably keeps me, that would be the worry that I've got about it all, is making sure that we should capture and reap the benefits of this as much as possible as a country. And it frustrates me if I find that, or if I see that we're delaying funding for things, or we've changed an instrument, or we've overcomplicated something, which means that deployment's delayed by 2 years. And we could have had these things deployed if only someone hadn't done that. And that's very frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, and so interesting. And is that Does that come down to money and regulation?
Yeah, it does. Money and regulation, I think, generally. I think that it seems to me that the UK is obsessed with fairness, which is great, and is obsessed with competition to drive down and to get best value, which in one sense is absolutely terrific and is what we need to do. But if you apply that ethos to early stage innovations and technologies where you're looking to change, a wide approach, it doesn't quite work, because you can't drive value out in competition if the industry isn't established to actually first deploy the technology to reap the gains and to reap the benefits of efficiencies from having done the first deployments and the first technologies. And that's a frustrating thing I see again and again with the UK.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to send out a call to action. You were talking about the amazing companies that you're working with and that the Burges Salmon works with in the wider environment,
Yeah.
and the UK itself. If you could issue one call to action to business leaders listening today, what would it be?
Well, I'm not sure I should be lecturing other business leaders on what they should be doing. I suppose what I would say is it would be great to see, and certainly what we're trying to do at Burges Salmon is spread the word that actually, if on decarbonisation and responsible business more widely, it is good business. It is good business, and look at how it's benefiting us. And so it's probably not quite answering your question, but what I would say to the businesses out there that have done that are doing that, of which there are numerous, let's all collectively spread the word about how valuable and how useful this is, and how it benefits our businesses, to convince the smaller number of those that are yet to be convinced that it's a good thing to do.
Brilliant. Ross, thank you so much for joining me today. I guess, gosh, what have I taken from this conversation? I guess it's the ability to connect through a vision. There's a practical realities of making it happen. You've got that funding, that valley of death, that collaboration, that regulation, innovation. But I think probably what you've just demonstrated there, is that leadership is probably one of the most important things that we can all bring to this. I mean, your work on projects like the Bristol City Leap, I think probably shows us that it isn't all about technology and finance, but about partnerships, culture,
Absolutely.
courage. And I think, your perspective from Renewables UK reminds us, just how vital it is for the industry and everyone to speak with a strong and united voice. So to you, Ross, thank you so much. To my listeners, thank you for listening. I hope this episode has given you some fresh insights into the opportunities and challenges around clean energy, and perhaps some inspiration as to how your organisation can play a part. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it with a colleague or a friend who cares about our future. And until next time, keep asking the hard questions. Thank you so much.